Goldstone made plastic components, wire, plugs, hairdryers, all these things. They were great innovators, and many of the specialised machines which were required to manufacture these goods were designed and developed by Ward and Goldstone himself. So it was really a very good environment for somebody such as myself.
Well, Ward and Goldstone shipped all the electrical goods to Woolworth. I think some went abroad. Well, it's all over the country. When you got a parcel, before you wrapped it up, you used to put a little piece of paper and single and like a friend. And so that'd go to Woolworth, say Welling Garden City. Big shop, the girl would open it, unpack it, and this letter would be there. So she was, for a bit of fun, she'd probably say, "Look, you should write to him." But the box wife would get it because he was at work with the postman.
And really, this was the first contact I had with the family nature of employees. Steve Doyle was the foreman, and he had 2 sons who worked there. But I found that there was a lot of employees like that whose families were members of the company, and it was almost expected in a way. It didn't seem to matter whether there was a vacancy in the company if you had somebody who was willing to come. It probably came from the top because the company at that time was family run. It was Ward and Goldstone, but it was virtually Goldstone family that ran the company.
I left school at 15, which was a year earlier than you were supposed to leave school at that time. I begged my dad to let me finish school a year early, which he then had to go and see the headmaster at school because I was supposed to stay until 16. I was able to leave school, but then obviously Dad said, "You need to get a job now. You know, you've left school, now you need to work." And my father worked at Ward and Goldstone's at the time. He had no influence on me getting a job. I had to go for the interview, but he just advised me that to get a trade, you should get an apprenticeship. They do apprenticeships at Ward and Goldstone's. I suggest you get down there and get an interview and get the application form, which is what I did.
I just lost my father at 15 years old, and it was at a time when I was sort of developing from being a young person to a young man, and role models were important.
Yeah.
And that was before I'd ever heard the term role model. It just didn't exist then. But first of all, when I joined Cheltenham Street, I was surrounded by men. Many of them reminded me of my father. You think your father's unique, but here was a whole bunch of men who were very similar to my father, and many of them took me under their wing, and that was just at an ordinary level of just people who are working there. It was maybe a Salford thing, maybe a Lancashire thing, or maybe a countrywide thing. It was just an era where it was very easy to get a job. There was work, there was engineering work certainly for any young bloke such as myself. And so maybe these experiences that I had were being repeated in factories all around the country. I felt that it was my duty to join the union. I felt quite strongly about that because these were the men that at that time were giving me everything I needed. I felt that there was not really a way that I could take that without supporting them, at least for that period. I came round to feeling that they were quite right in their views anyway, and that there was no way that I could have worked in that industry without being a union member.
The union, it was quite strong at the time. It was led by a gentleman called Ken Cottrell. He was the works convener. He was very a strong unionist. In fact, in 1975, 5 weeks before I was due to get married, we went on a 4-week strike at Ward and Goldstone's. But that was led by Mr Cottrell. I can remember he was a very passionate man. I didn't know at the time just how influential he was, but when he was advising us to go out on strike, he was a table thumper, you know, he used to bang the table and get very passionate about what he was saying. And only a couple of years later, he died, Ken Cottrell. I remember his funeral cortege passed Woolworth, and everyone came out to pay the last respects. And I naively at the time asked someone else, you know, this is a good response. Why is it so popular? And he said to me, back at home in his house, his front part was like a room that he would give advice to people who would come in about problems. And I didn't know that, and that took me back a bit and thought that accounts for his popularity.
He said, Glen, I know you've got a young lad and now got twins. Your wife can't see to them. Sort your own family out every morning. Whatever time you come to work, I'll trust you. And so I wouldn't start at 8:30. I'd get my little boy into nursery and get on the bus, get in my car and put the car in. And go to work. It might be at the trench field, it might be at the Majestic, at Falmouth, so on, wherever I was working. And it was built on trust.
One afternoon, working in the very hot, very smelly moulding shop, in the middle of the afternoon in this hot and uncomfortable environment, I sat myself down on a tea chest, and within a few minutes, with the heat and noise of the machinery around me, I nodded off. And to my great embarrassment, a little while later, I nudged myself awake, and with my head down, I saw in front of me a pair of very highly polished brown brogues. As I looked up, it was the chairman, Mr Sam. Yes, he had his eye on everybody and everything.